From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Alexis, codenamed Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It's the top of the week, which means it is time for some strange news. Where are Mexican cartels getting all this hardware from? What's going on with Iran, the U.S., and that weird sound in Florida that might just be fish banging? Is Bear going to be held responsible for some various other things? Before we do any of that, we'll get to all that and more, but before we do any of that, we've got an up-and-coming musician to talk about, and even before then, Noel, you had some thoughts on the recent resurgence in viral popularity of Stanley Cups, not the hockey trophy.
Exactly. I mean, look, first of all, that's the first time I heard all this hubbub about the Stanley Cup. I'm like, oh, I guess hockey's taken off in the States now. You know, people are like all of a sudden getting stoked about hockey. Not the case. Apparently, this company, Stanley, has been around for like 100 years and largely, much like the whole deal with Carhartt, the brand, kind of shifting from like a working class sort of like, you know, dungarees or whatever and beanies for the construction site into more of a fashion forward brand. That's kind of what's happened with Stanley. They were largely known for the kind of thermoses, insulated thermoses that you might see folks taking to a work site. And then I don't know exactly how it happened. There were a couple of things that contributed to it. One, I think, was a story about like a car fire that like the only thing that survived was one of these Stanley Quencher cups or whatever. But they're very popular among nurses. They're very popular among, you know, kind of young people. There are even stories about how young people are getting bullied for not having Stanley Cups or for having knockoff Stanley Cups. Kind of like a bit of a rags to riches kind of story for this brand. They started doing all these exclusive colors. People are getting in fights over them at Walmart's. There was a heist of them recently, to go into our recent kind of fascination with weird heists. But the story today is that it has been confirmed that these products do contain lead. There were some like kind of TikTok moms that do these sort of like, you know, testing of stuff to make sure there's no bad chemicals or whatever in them. And one user reported using one of these tests that you can get on Amazon, swabbing the inside of Stanley Cups, also swabbing the inside of, I believe it's, what's that other one? Yeti? Yeah, a Yeti brand cup. It's also a similar kind of deal in that space. And one other thing, and the other two tested negative and the Stanley Cup tested positive. And we're hearing all kinds of reports. There's lead in Stanley Cups. The company has come out and said, yes, there is lead in them, but it's okay because it's part of the manufacturing process that goes into sealing the base of them, that creates this like mega vacuum, whatever, I don't know, material science well enough for manufacturing to know why that would be the choice that they would make. It might be part and parcel of the fact this is an old legacy company, you know, so maybe it's like an old school thing. They said it's okay. It won't ever be exposed unless the cup breaks, which is very rare, but I guess possible. But then that does beg the question, why was the TikTok mom getting positive test results from swabbing the inside of the cup where the drink goes? So there's a lot of reporting out there, people saying, largely believing Stanley. It seems like the general internet consensus is that Stanley's telling the truth, and this is sort of a non-issue. But I am a little skeptical with these tests that are showing positive results of lead inside the cup where the drink goes. Obviously, much like conversation we had in our last episode, there are allowable levels of all kinds of toxins.
Cyanide.
Even cyanide.
Well,
so,
have we forgotten about potential water lead contamination?
100%.
So like you wash the cup and then you swab it and you think, oh, well, there's just water here that was in there. And
it's true. I was interested in the control elements of the test that this one crack TikTok mom had, that she was cross-testing other types of products, which you would assume she's washing in the same sink, but only the Stanley tested positive. So all this to say, interesting. We'll be interested to see if this affects their sales or the craze of it at all. Kind of think it won't. It does seem like the consensus is that Stanley is to be believed. Believe Stanley.
Yeah. Because, the microplastics and the forever chemicals are getting in there anyway, no matter what you put in it.
Throw a little lead in there. Just add to the seasoning.
It was fine. It was a good run,
It's the spice of life.
Also, that if you want to see the video that inspired this viral interest and then the natural pushback or recursive nature of internet conversation, it's a person named Danielle on TikTok. In her car fire, the thing that made Stanley popular online was that in the fire, the Stanley Cup still had the ice cubes preserved.
Oh, wow. You can't buy that kind of marketing.
Right?
Oh, you can't. You almost got to wonder if the fine folks at
they
Stanley.
Didn't do it.
Okay, okay, we're sure about that.
They did
okay.
not an inside job.
Just making sure.
So tell us about this Taylor Swift person. It's tough to make a living in music, isn't it?
I know. The first thing you know, she's just playing at coffee shops and little indie venues, and now she's the biggest pop star on the planet. Seems to have happened overnight. No, it did not happen overnight. It was a very methodical and intentionally tracked career trajectory. And you got to give props where props is due. There's a little something in the Taylor Swift catalog for everyone. She's interesting also in that she fought back against the record companies who owned her master recording rights and just said, screw you guys, I own my publishing. I'm just going to re-record all those records myself. And everyone may have heard of the Taylor's version phenomenon. So there's she's slowly been not slowly, actually, honestly, kind of astonishingly quickly going through her entire catalog. The company Big Machine was the record label that sort of found her when she was sort of actually a bit smaller from the Nashville scene. Because as you may or may not know, she sort of came up as more of a pop country artist and then gradually went way more mainstream and has since amassed just an absolute throng of loyal followers, who will hang on her every word.
Swifties.
Swifties. Don't cross Taylor or the Swifties will come for you, much like the Beehive with Beyonce. But I would argue more intense, I think, perhaps. But I don't know. That's up for debate. But she's really been in the news a lot lately. She won Time Magazine's Person of the Year, largely because of the unbelievable success of her Eras tour, which, as we know, was just the hottest ticket in the known universe. And it was just, people were traveling from far and wide to go, crash Ticketmaster, many times over, caused all kinds of conversations around the fairness, the equity of ticket monopolies like that. We've had this conversation in the past, but it's only when an artist with that much power enters the chat that things really start to change. And I think that's part of what we're going to talk about today. All of that's just as a little bit of primer, hopefully not being too redundant for folks that are already following the story. But the latest is sort of threefold. I guess we'll start with the easy one because it's something that we talked about, I believe, a couple of episodes ago. There has been a rash of AI-generated lewd images of Taylor Swift that have been kind of proliferating on the internet. Some bordering on pornographic, most just kind of lewd, just naughty, like there's some that are depicting her like as sort of like an exotic dancer, perhaps, surrounded by a bunch of dudes who are kind of copping feels and things like that. There's one of her like making out with the coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll get to the Chiefs part of things in a bit as well. And I think what I mentioned when I was talking about it on the podcast was that I saw this and showed it to my partner, who immediately said, "Oh, Taylor's not going to like that." And then literally a couple of hours later, article pops up on some tech website saying representatives of Taylor Swift seeking legal action against this stuff. And Matt and Ben, I believe both of y'all pointed out that this is one of those litmus tests of this kind of thing. It's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. It's hard to get things stricken from the internet once it's already out there. Ben, I believe you pointed out the Streisand effect.
Yeah. That's what I referenced. It's a law of the internet, up there with that one other evil rule that seems accurate, which is if you can imagine a fandom, then some pornographic version of that fandom exists. It's like Rule 37, or it's got a weird number attached to it. But yeah, this also, it's strange because I think maybe was talking with you guys a little bit off air about this. People have been asking the U.S. Congress and indeed the West overall to pass some sort of legislation weighing in on this idea, like deep fakes for political, propagandistic, or pornographic purposes. And it seems like this might be the case that gets Congress to act. They have a bill that isn't a law yet, but I think it's up now, isn't it? On the way?
Well, it does beg the question, like, is Taylor Swift a powerful enough public figure that this stuff would be outside the realm of just fan fiction? Like, would this stuff potentially be damaging in a way that would affect her and her business in real life, as opposed to just being something a little bit rude that maybe people completely know isn't real? And I would argue that the images that I've seen, I don't think there's anybody believing that these are real. Yeah, they look, more realistic than the kinds of face swaps we used to see in the past with celebrities on, like, Pornhub or whatever. But it has a cartoony quality to it. It has a stylized quality to it, but it doesn't have to. I mean, if you can tell Mid-Journey to make things photorealistic. You can tell them to make it in the style of, so it's definitely an issue. But to me, the question is, like, is this just fan fiction of a public figure? And that to me seems to be protected by freedom of expression.
Right. That's an important distinction. I appreciate you making it. That fan fiction we're referring to would be something in print, right? They're writing about like slash fiction, but the idea of depicting fictional characters versus public figures who are real people, that's the line. And what I was looking for
but
is
it could be a cartoon or drawn.
Graphic novel.
The Defiance Act of 2024. It came out. You can read about it online. They have some interesting stats here. Like you said, Noel, it's clearly in reaction to the proliferation of deep fakes and algorithm-generated images and footage. They had a stat that stands out. They said a study from 2019 found that 96% of deepfake videos during that year were non-consensual pornography.
Mm-hmm. So that's gross.
The problem is real.
We all think this is gross, and I'm not saying this should be okay. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that is a different conversation than, is it okay to make a deep fake video of a politician saying something they didn't say that could cause a panic, that could cause, it's like the yelling fire in a public place. That's illegal. That's not freedom of speech. That's not protected speech.
Freedom of speech means you can say what you want, but that does not indemnify you from the consequences, right? That's the fire in a theater example. Also, there was a Joe Biden deep fake going around in the Northeast. What was it? New Hampshire, where it was a robocall and it sounded like Joe Biden telling people not to vote. So this is a real thing.
It's okay. So then that does get me to the kind of the pivot here, which is the power aspect. Like, is Taylor Swift so powerful and influential that this is a different conversation, maybe around, like, how could this affect what people think? I think the, like, kind of naughty stylized images maybe fall into a different category, but we start thinking about, what if someone made deepfake videos of Taylor Swift telling the Swifties to vote for one party or another, right? Or to not whatever. So now we're starting to see this NFL stuff with Taylor Swift dating, what's his name? Kelsey, right?
Grammer.
Kelsey Grammer. Famous for playing the Beast in X-Men.
There is a funny video of David Letterman talking about how much he loves Taylor Swift and what she's doing for the NFL, and he keeps saying that she's dating Kelsey Grammer. But it's this football player, Kelsey, somebody.
It's Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce. Thank you. Travis Kelce. The fact that her presence at these games is causing such a stir, it's making ratings go up, because the Swifties that we were talking about are now all of a sudden watching football. They never cared about that. I mean, some of them probably did, but a lot of them probably didn't. So that's creating a real impact that the NFL seems to love, but a lot of old school NFL fans do not seem to love. They seem to despise. So there's a lot of noise online of people, sportos saying, stop putting the camera on Taylor Swift. But obviously, if you're the NFL, you're like, put the camera on Taylor Swift as much as possible, because we're going to get the numbers up. And obviously, this could really come into play when the Chiefs go to the Super Bowl. And the question then becomes, is Taylor Swift going to go? There is a massive conspiracy theory in the right that indicates that there are some high-profile members of the right who believe Taylor Swift is a government op along with her boyfriend, in order to sway the election that the NFL is rigged and that the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl, at which point Taylor Swift is going to come out and endorse Biden publicly. Taylor Swift has asked her fans to vote, and it was a massive surge in registration. Travis Kelce has asked people that follow him to get vaccinated, and I believe that made an impact too. So there's all this chatter that Taylor Swift is a government op, and even weirder stuff. Like she's connected with the Illuminati, whatever that is, and it's getting a little out of hand. I just wonder what you guys think about this. Is Taylor Swift powerful enough to sway an election? And why is the right freaking out so much if that's not the case? It seems to me they believe it is the case and that a lot of this other stuff is just smoke to try to, malign or shut down this potentiality.
Former President Donald Trump recently used the term holy war in a private conversation, sharing the same concern that Taylor Swift, the individual, would be able to trigger, possibly swing the needle in the upcoming 2024 election, possibly with more success than Uncle Xi, because, he recently told Joe Biden that China's not going to interfere in the election. We'll see how it works. But yeah, to your question there, Noel, I think it is abundantly clear that because fandom in the world of ubiquitous interaction, because it creates such a positive feedback loop, people who would ordinarily not participate in politics will do so for the somewhat tribal dopamine hit of being able to say, I, as a loyal Swiftie, did what Taylor said, So there is a great importance to it. I mean, we see that with a lot of public figures of that echelon. Like Beyonce, for instance, very rarely does public appearances, interviews, casual stuff, right? Because a statement from Beyonce can also move the needle. And the Taylor Swift thing, I think, is a little bit different. I love that you pointed out the Nashville Venn diagram there, right? She's hitting, as an entertainer, she's hitting a share of voters that ordinarily might not agree with each other.
That's right. But
because of the strength of this parasocial relationship, if she says jump, then they might jump.
I never really thought of that exactly in that way, Ben, but I think that's right. The demographic of her fandom is not exclusively hardcore lefties, right? They're Swifties, but not necessarily lefties. And some of them might not vote at all or might just be of the age where they can vote, right? So a lot of power in that. I don't know. I've got a tweet I want to read, or not. It's actually not a tweet. It's a thread. But Matt, I've been seeing the gears turning as you're taking all this in. Do you have any thoughts about the power of pop cultural figures? And have we ever seen anybody with this kind of power before who hasn't made a stand yet? Because she has asked people to register, but she hasn't endorsed a damn thing. And that still could be to come.
Look, I love Taylor Swift, and I don't know what you guys are talking about. She's one of the best people on the planet, and I will hear none of it, okay?
Don't you dare accuse us of maligning T. Swift. I am just saying she's powerful and that she hasn't come down on one side or the other of the issue yet. And I think, honestly, some people of that who are entertainers first, they make a conscious effort not to do that. And I also think they shouldn't be bullied into having to do that. But I think the power is fascinating and obviously has certain political folks running a little scared.
Yes. No, yeah. I feel all that stuff. The point I want to make on this particular story is about the NFL and all the allegations that sport, like the NBA was allegedly for quite a time and probably still is, it's all rigged.
Shout out Brian Toohey.
I agree with that.
Shout out Brian Toohey. Indeed. Yep. Our episode we made with him about the NBA and possible, weird stuff going on there and other, I actually think he focused more on the MLB, on baseball. The NBA is when we talked to Tim Livingston, I believe, who made a show with Tenderfoot about that. Fascinating stuff. Anyway, I'm getting into this because of another podcast called The Raven, another Tenderfoot production that Tim's working on. But the history of the NFL and sports betting is fascinating. And in 2021, they made a deal with some of these big online sports betting organizations to like allow them to also bet MGM, Fox Bet, WinBet, PointsBet, and all of these, which then leads to that conversation that we had on those shows, on those episodes, right? About whether or not a major organization would also take part in setting up games for massive windfalls through the sports betting arenas.
Totally. And now that a lot of that stuff is so open and legal with like your DraftKings and all of this online stuff, that's relatively new. So it's just, you got to wonder how that's going to affect the business at large. Because let's be real, y'all, it is a business, you know?
Yeah, because they were already partnered with DraftKings, FanDuel, and I think Caesars. So it's a road that we could travel down, and I'd be interested to see if there's any fire there to the smoke that's being alleged. But I don't know.
I just want to end this segment with this. I found a thread that popped up to me. They're really feeding you these threads if you're an Instagram person. And this is from Stone Kettle. And it said, the Taylor Swift thing, it's funny, but it's also crazy as hell. It is symptomatic of a dangerous growing instability gripping a huge chunk of the population. For these people, the entire world has become some enormous, fantastically complex conspiracy aimed at them, and everything is evidence of it. Nothing is fringe, and every insanity, no matter how bizarre, is mainstreamed and taken at face value. No, I just thought that sort of summed this up pretty well. And then there's some nice back and forth. Unchecked, he ends, this kind of madness leads directly to the violent suicide of civilization. Woo! Okay. Let's take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, and then come back with some more strange news.
And we've returned. Guys, are we familiar with the comedian Adam Ray, R-A-Y?
I don't think I know Adam Ray.
Really? Okay.
Like I have a passing recognition of
it. Sounds
name.
Recognizable, right? So he notably played the role of policeman in the 2023 smash hit Barbie. And he is a really great impressionist and comedian. I've been watching him lately. He does this live show, I believe in Los Angeles, maybe in other places too, called Dr. Phil Live, where he portrays Dr. Phil, and he has on people, and they do basically the Dr. Phil show, but as this very funny person playing the role. Anyway, he did an episode recently with Adam and Durs from This Is Important, and he also, the one that I'm thinking about, guys, if you haven't seen the clip, check it out now. He had on Bobby Lee and Andrew Santino, who have a really
Bobby
funny
Lee so much. I love Bobby Lee so much.
Well, they've got a tremendously silly podcast, and they came on, and it's just one of the funniest things that I've viewed in a long time. Just putting that out there for everybody and for you guys. Okay, let's get into our very serious subject here today: arms trafficking and cartels. This story comes to us from Mexico City. This is a tale as old as time. You could probably trace it back to, I don't know. Let's just say the 80s, and let's be kind to the U.S. government, but let's say the 80s, when there were U.S. military grade weapons being sent all over South America and Mexico, as well as Latin America, and they were being sent to, usually, let's say U.S. military personnel and their friends. Where basically I'm saying there were U.S. military grade weapons being shipped all over the place in these areas. Now, the country of Mexico is alerting the world, and especially the United States, to a major problem it's seeing of what appear to be U.S. military grade weapons in the hands of cartel members that they are battling, right? So we're talking Mexican military personnel that are fighting cartels with these weapons. We're also talking about local police forces that are fighting cartels with these weapons, as well as, the equivalent of like DEA and FBI there in Mexico. The story, we'll just read, is from AP News. It was published Monday, January 22nd. It is titled, Mexico Demands Investigation into U.S. Military Grade Weapons Being Used by Drug Cartels, right on the nose there. Mexico is looking for an urgent investigation into how exactly these U.S. military grade weapons are finding their way into the hands of these members who are using them against the security forces. These are things like belt-fed machine guns, rocket launchers, and grenades. things that you don't want to deal with the wrong end of, right? And they're generally not sold for civilian use. Before we even get into the rest of the article here, guys, I think we've all found in research for this subject, just in, seeing the news and thinking about it, there are states in the United States where you can procure such things. Mm-hmm. Some of it is a little more off book, like the rocket launchers are a little more iffy.
Let's call it gray market.
Yeah, grenades just right underneath that, but the belt-fed machine guns and like Sig Sauer huge like 50 cal rifles are a whole other thing, because that's a whole other problem here. Like these large, essentially sniper rifles that use the larger ammunition.
So the implication being that there's an inside person that's feeding them this stuff, or that there's even potentially government involvement?
I think the first part is a clarification that I really appreciate, Matt, which is that in some states, some of this hardware that is military grade can be acquired legally. So it's expensive, it's inconvenient, it can happen, but nowhere near this degree is the issue.
I would say it's highly unlikely that you have even a large number of people who are buying these weapons legally in the U.S. then shipping them to Mexico, because
you couldn't get that scale, right? It wouldn't. Yeah.
Right. It'd be tough.
It would be tough to scale, and also the legal matter of tracing guns, because when you buy one of those guns, you're going to get registered in some way somewhere, unless you're buying it, secondhand, third hand, and you basically create a paper trail that's difficult to follow.
We don't need serial numbers between friends, right?
Yeah.
You meet out in the desert, you make sure everyone's got a cool vibe, and then you get your bag.
Yes.
You have an inside connection.
Well, yeah, the vibe I would say that Mexico is putting out is that, hey, U.S. military, maybe there's a backdoor problem that you've got going on with your military, with your supplies, right?
Which is almost certainly true, in my opinion.
think so too. Yes, I'm sorry. Just elephant in the room, guys. I guess it's not really an elephant. It's just, the room.
Well, so it brings up the thing we mentioned at the top, but also another issue. The first thing is that U.S. military-grade weapons are hanging out all over the place. Stockpiles of them that have just existed since the 1980s and before that, then get repurposed, or then an official military body comes through in a country where those weapons were used, takes them over, and then has them stockpiled, but then maybe they leak out. We know corruption amongst military members within Mexico itself is a huge issue that they've been dealing with for decades. But even recently, we've talked about it on this show, where it appears that there are potential leaks for that kind of thing, and potential, let's say, lines to that someone could follow to get that hardware.
Agreed.
It's a really messed up issue, because these weapons were used to do things like destroy planes recently that were at an international airport. Like cartel members used some of this weaponry to destroy that kind of stuff.
To stop a boss from escaping, right?
Yeah, that was when one of El Chapo's sons was being arrested or being taken in. There was a huge, I don't know, pushback, resistance to that action being taken by the military, where very dangerous weapons were being used against military members and civilians alike. Horrifying, terrifying stuff that if you were there to witness it, just the number of bullet holes I'm looking at a picture right now of the entrance to the city hall in this one part of Mexico City where cartels shot it up. And they're just these huge holes that are not from standard style, like an AR-15 or something.
Jeez.
Gosh, guys, we don't even need to spend that much time on this, because it is this huge quagmire of an idea, of a concept, of a thing that's happening that doesn't have an exact answer, but Mexico wants an answer. That's the whole point. They want to know what the heck's happening, and they're reaching out to the U.S., the government, to the ambassador saying, hey, what the heck is the problem? Help us figure it out. And
do they not deserve an answer? I feel like that's a very fair thing. I mean, like, think through, I love that you pointed out there the messy logistics, right, of the U.S. being the hegemon of those two continents. What happens is you get your freedom fighters, your right-wing guerrilla, and you stage a coup, right? Shout out Guatemala in the 50s and so on. And you typically, unfortunately, this is true, you typically cut that native talent and you leave them adrift. You don't take back their guns. You don't take back their stuff. So that means there's a lot of material that's unaccounted for, and there's not a very high, unfortunately, in the domestic U.S., there is a huge incentive on monitoring and tracking this kind of stuff, or civilian-esque versions of it, prosumer, if you wish. But abroad, there's very little oversight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And people sometimes forget that you could hop on a plane and abroad is like 2 to 3 hours away. You know?
Oh, yeah. I think that's one of the main points Mexican officials have been making. If you are a civilian living in Mexico, you can buy low-grade firearms, like the small stuff, right? Low-caliber weapons. If you and you can't get a hold of the other stuff, you can't do it legally. So it has to be coming from somewhere. And like, what holes do we need to plug to make sure this thing stops leaking guns into our country?
Well, dude, also, not to mention the hypocrisy of it all. Like, there's so much rhetoric, in certain political spaces around Mexico and how they're leaking drugs and evil people into, you know what I mean? Just like the rhetoric, the heated rhetoric behind that. We have to plug those holes, build the wall, whatever. And again, I'm not coming down on any political side here. It's a fact. These things are said. I could imagine that does not sit well oftentimes with these folks who in power there. I mean, and we know there's corruption, we know there's problems, but when they see these weapons that they believe are coming from us unchecked, causing some of the problems that we're blaming on Mexico, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I could see the hypocrisy there being a bit of a...
It's not hard to find where those guns are manufactured is the issue. You know what I mean? It's not like a mystery that, this insert hardware here came from somewhere, but we don't know where. We suspect it was maybe made in the U.S. No, it's 100%. This stuff is made in the United States. And it's somehow getting into the hands of very dangerous people who honestly aspire to replace the government and the rule of law of that country. It's a very dangerous thing.
Dude. But this is the other major part of this. I can't believe you didn't bring this up yet. There's a lawsuit, some news that just came out of Mexico about a lawsuit. They are suing 7 U.S. gun manufacturers for $10 billion. There's a lawsuit right now. It had at one point gotten struck down or dismissed, basically. Like, you can't sue the gun manufacturers for
guns
people.
Guns don't kill people,
Bullets kill people.
People kill people.
That was the big deal. I'm going to get this wrong, y'all. There's a rule. It's not a law, but it is one of those rulings that came down before that said you cannot sue the gun manufacturer because somebody used a weapon to kill somebody. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
that they just made the tool, somebody else with malice or whatever intent or whatever it was used it and someone died. But that only holds true within the United States, which is what this latest ruling said. Mm-hmm. So it's basically saying, yeah, well, if Mexico wants to sue the manufacturers, I guess we have to see this thing out and see how it plays. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a fascinating thing that plays out over the next 2-3 years or however long it takes.
Especially because that's a relatively recent U.S. law, right? It's
Protection of Lawful Commerce of Arms Act, or the PLCAA.
George W. Yeah, mostly true. It's very difficult in the U.S. to hold, your local, I don't know why I said it, like your local mom and pop defense company. It's tough to hold them liable in civil court, at least, right?
Hey, quit picking on the defense companies, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything wrong.
Well, no matter what route these guns are taking, it is believed, at least by the Mexican authorities, the government there, that 70% of all guns that are getting in the hands of cartels come directly from the United States, from these weapon manufacturers that they've got beef with, rightly so. So we'll see how it plays out. There is a story, though, that I think we should cover specifically at some point in a full episode. It's a story about a factory in Wisconsin that was manufacturing weapons, these large caliber, like they call them 50 caliber rifles, and how in some way $600,000 worth of these things went to a cartel of the weapons that were being manufactured there. It is a twisted, weird tale. Vice has been writing about it. Reuters has been writing about it. A bunch of places wrote about it. I think it first hit the news like late last year, 2023. It's strange, you guys. And it makes me think about the reach of the cartel. How far does it go? How many countries is, one particular cartel in, like the Sinaloa cartel or the New Generation cartel? It's creepy, and I think we should look into it further.
Yeah, writing it down. And also another question that the public media doesn't ask as often as it should. How well do these cartels play with others? Meaning, for instance, you might not have full reach into the upper Midwest based on your current organizational structure, but you may know someone who knows someone, right? And you could talk omerta a little bit with some locals. That kind of stuff happens. That's why it's called organized crime. They're super into this kind of thing. I think it's absolutely plausible. I agree with you. Wrote it down. This is an episode in the future.
Heck yeah. The Mexican government, by the way, estimates around 200,000 weapons are manufactured in the U.S. and then sent to Mexico each year in some way.
I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
Are they coming in new? Or are they
No, sorry. Not as in like they're manufactured and then sent directly. Let's say 200,000 weapons that were at some point manufactured by U.S. based companies end up in Mexico every year.
Possibly with a secondary, like a third-party transit country of some sort.
Yes, exactly. And that is an estimate. So the question is track down the lines.
And guys, I mean, we know that the U.S. military has lost nukes before in the past. It would not shock me that there was just an ungodly number of these stockpiles of let's call them vintage weapons, that there maybe aren't keeping as close a watch on anymore as they should. And that maybe the leaks are coming from some of that as well, if not largely. I would be interested to see what make and vintage some of these guns are. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not this year's models. It's probably, I bet you they're quite old.
Like the AKs and the Kalashnikovs. Kalashnikovs are a currency in some more troubled parts of the world. Once it gets out, you can't get back in. And I would advance, I'm just going off the top here, I would advance the idea that the U.S. probably has messy oversight for anything handheld abroad. I think it's just too difficult to watch every falling belt-fed sparrow.
Well, and we've talked about black market arms dealing is a thing, and it's been a thing since arms have existed, and it's not going to stop. Just how much worse is it going to get? And is it possible to, I guess, get the guns at the source, which is the factories making them? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Let us know what you think. We'll tell you how to contact us at the end here. For now, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
We've returned. Bleep the G-Rides. I want the machines that are making them, as our pal Zach said once upon a time. We're going to end with a tiny bit of hopefully good news. It's scary, but hopefully it's good news. Actually, wait, no. We're going to give you the good news story. We'll give you a couple weird ones at the end. So we talk often on this show about pharmaceutical companies, about R&D stuff. And you have probably heard, longtime conspiracy realist, you probably heard some advertisements for various pharmaceutical products on this show. However, that does not affect our reporting of these things. And Matt, Noel, you'll remember a while back, we had gotten very deep into neonicotinoids. It was once called a conspiracy theory that those things were killing bees. They are very much killing bees. We also looked at herbicides. One of the most popular herbicides is Roundup. Have you ever used Roundup, you guys?
No, not personally, but it's certainly it's almost like Xerox is synonymous with, making copies, or Coke is synonymous with soda. Roundup is kind of occupies that same kind of space with pesticides.
That's a great point. Yeah, I love that. It became the eponymous trademark.
That's the word.
Yeah. So Roundup is super popular.
Roundup ready crops?
Yeah. Like, Matt, did you ever use Roundup?
I did not, because we talked about Roundup early on in my having a house career. So yeah, no, I avoided this stuff like crazy. But it is weird how many products have similar chemicals in them.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of time before we all go, oh crap, that one does it too.
Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, the German pharmaceutical giant Bayer bought the American agrochemical giant Monsanto back in 2018. Wheels within wheels, just like a pyramid, ownership attenuates and agglomerates at the top. I want to go to a Washington Post article that came out January 27th, 2024. So just a few days ago, as you're hearing this strange news on February 5th. Shout out to Francis Vinal, who writes, Bayer is ordered to pay $2.25 billion after a jury links the herbicide Roundup to cancer. $2.25 billion. Maybe the good guys win sometimes. Maybe the courts work. I don't know. What do you guys think? Just off that headline.
It sounds great, don't it? But again, this is a huge company. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of people. We get that. We feel empathy for those humans.
Agreed.
But it does seem like this is something we've kind of known. And then I'm going to continue one more, but Ben, the science, I'm doing quotations here, is still out.
He's doing quotes so hard, you guys. Yeah. And they're deserved. Those are two really great points, two really great butts. And the person awarded these damages is a guy named John McKivison. And McKivison filed a lawsuit in Philly when he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And he said, this happened because I used Roundup specifically on my property for the better part of 2 decades. And so the jury comes back and they unanimously find that Roundup is carcinogenic. It did give this guy lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that Monsanto either knew or was criminally negligent, like willfully ignorant about the dangers of Roundup. And so they say this is the lawyers, the legal team, Tom Klein and Jason Icken, said this verdict is, quote, a condemnation of 50 years of misconduct by Monsanto, which again is owned by Bayer. So would Bayer have made this purchase in 2018 if they knew what was coming? Interesting boardroom conversations. You know what I mean? Off the record, no phones in the room, I imagine. Monsanto fires back, or Bayer fires back, and they say, we're appealing this. It's $2.25 billion. Obviously, we're appealing this. And
that's a lot. That's a lot for one.
That's a lot for one. What about the class action? You know what I mean? Which is surely on the way. They also called the damages awarded by the court, they called it, quote, unconstitutionally excessive. And this reminds me, I thought it was such a great setup in our previous conversation before the break. The controversy surrounding liability of gun manufacturers or firearm defense companies, things like that.
It came immediately to mind in terms of the Purdue case, where it's so rare to even have any whiff of holding those types of executives or the company accountable. It was only when there was clearly malice and malicious, and maybe not malicious. Okay, well, whatever. Don't want to editorialize here, but clearly an intent to ignore data and push forth something that was going to cause people to die with their knowledge. It's different with medicine, though, because death is only kind of a side effect of medicine. Death is like the point of guns. So it's sort of hard to, you know what I mean? Like,
defense is the point of guns, brother.
The ultimate point is death, or at the very least, making people do things as a result of the fear of death. So death is sort of the end goal of guns.
The point is to hit them with some bird shot so they know you're coming, and then with some buckshot so they know you mean business.
I think also the point is death is but a door, time is but a window. I'll be back. Shout out Vigo, Ghostbusters. Can we get an air horn, Doc? Thank you.
Schwarzenegger snuck in there somewhere.
That guy was sinister.
I had a lot of plot twists today, guys. I actually had to listen to a lot of Schwarzenegger statements for a different thing. But this is like, these are actual arguments. Another example of this is the, to your point, Noel, the Sackler family in Purdue. However, the courts end up working those things out. They have still created an environment wherein dangerous addictive drugs are sort of peer pressured onto patients who might not need them. Like, remember, I was so confused. We were talking about this off air. I was so confused when doctors went hard on the paint to prescribe me oxycodone or oxycorton.
Oxycontin.
No, it's not content anymore.
Hydrocodone.
Hydrocodone is classic. That's like classic Coke. Oxycontin was like the next level up, and that was what they said wouldn't get you addicted in the way that hydrocodone would. But yeah, hydrocodone's still okay. It has a lot of Tylenol in it, and so it's very commonly prescribed for like things like oral surgery. But it also, left unchecked, and if they don't know that the person has an addictive personality, can very quickly lead to addiction.
You don't want to go fall the House of the Usher or whatever it was called.
Right. Yeah, that was a great adaptation.
you don't want to take that fall of the House of Usher. That's a deep fall. That's a fall flat on your face right there.
And I feel like these three examples we're mentioning, firearms, opioids, and now carcinogenic things that are just for your lawn, these things show us one troubling commonality, indeed something I could argue is conspiratorial, which is the burden falls upon the consumer. Caveat emptor, as they said. There's serious questions about liability for the creators of these and other products, even unto, of course, like food manufacturers. That's a big thing we talk about pretty often over the years, like the way the EU handles ingredients versus the way the UK or the US handles ingredients. I mean, the European Commission already got in front of this because in 2023 now, they put in a ruling about the active ingredient in Roundup, glyphosate, and they said, we don't think it's carcinogenic. And Canada said the same thing, and Bayer has a lot of money.
What we have here is a difference of opinion, folks. That's what we have here. We don't believe that this is carcinogenic, despite the scientific results. These eggheads don't know what they're talking about. And that's how they talk. Sorry.
That is exactly how they talk. And 4 years ago, interestingly enough, Bayer agreed to pay a settlement in a class action lawsuit. Tens of thousands of people. Bayer paid a total of $10 billion over allegations that Roundup causes, wait for it, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And because Bayer is a very powerful, big company, they did not admit wrongdoing. They just gave $10 billion away.
Ben, if you're hearing me chuckle every now and then, it's because I'm just hearing, in my mind, you're describing a bear. Like, bear feels very strongly about this, and the bear does this, and the bear does that. In my mind, it's just the culprit here is a giant anthropomorphic bear.
Love it.
I know that's not the case, but, I have a very active imagination. My mommy told me.
Right to bear arms. That's what I always tried not to bring that up during our very serious conversation about the weapons trade.
Yeah. I mean, everyone has a right to bear arms. All you got to do is lift, bro. You lift to get those bear arms.
Yeah. Buy some fur. So Bayer also, Bayer, in their most recent annual report to investors, they were required to state that they have 31 separate lawsuits in Canada related to Roundup. 11 of those 31 lawsuits are looking to become class action lawsuits. Bayer and Monsanto, Roundup, those brands are in trouble. We don't know how far this will go. And obviously, Matt, I think we can all agree with the point you raised earlier so astutely. We're not saying these companies are filled with evil, villainous monsters. A lot of people make a good living there, and they're definitely not waking up every morning saying, I hope I give someone lymphoma.
They probably don't believe that it causes lymphoma. And I think that's just a part of being in that position, especially like people who are putting together the chemicals, people who are packaging these things. Like, you cannot believe, I think that's that cognitive dissonance kind of thing where, like, even if someone showed you, hey, this definitely causes cancer, like, but this also allows me to feed my family. It's a weird thing.
And they're like, your family stinks, though.
It's similar to what happened with Purdue, where it's like, well, that's not what our scientists say. You know what I mean? And again, no shade on scientists, but we know a lot of the folks that end up getting those jobs working for these big companies come from regulatory backgrounds. They know how to kind of twist the numbers a little bit, maybe. And again, I'm not trying to malign scientists or saying that there are people out there doing quote unquote bad science.
This just in, Noel Brown hates scientists.
I'm really anti-science, guys. Yeah. I have a real agenda. But no, we know that you can, by virtue of limiting the scope of research, kind of get the results you want to keep doing the thing that you're doing, Not too long ago, R.J. Reynolds supported studies where they found some doctor who was like, actually, smoking cigarettes is great for your respiratory, for breathing. It's like refreshing.
It's the best.
Remember when there was all this talk about how the reason people in France didn't get COVID is because they smoked so many cigarettes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying, causality or whatever without causation. Never mind. There's different ways of looking at this stuff where you can definitely be like, that's the thing. See, that's the thing that did it. It was this. And we like that because it's our thing,
Correlation v causation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just as an aside, speaking of that kind of thing,
Sure.
A little while ago, we talked about these things, med beds, right? And I threw so much shade on all this stuff and I made a video put out there, so much shade. Then there really is new research coming out talking about resonances and cellular destruction and like ways to target, like hyper targeting part of the like a tumor that's inside a brain, and then being able to actually use again
vibrations, right?
Different type of vibrations than sitting on a bed and someone good
ones presumably, right? Good
playing
vibrations.
Yeah, but just playing some tones near you, but using just vibrational tones to do things like cure cancer or at least remove a tumor.
Didn't we talk about? Did we not? We might have talked about
we danced around a little bit, but I think Matt's saying that he's been seeing some new stuff that pushes this even further into the realms of possibility.
But just saying how quickly our belief can potentially be shifted if we're willing to take in evidence, right?
And if we have skin in the game, especially, if it's like, oh, this might apply to my nana, wow, I want to believe, right?
Well,
exactly.
Also, you always have to hear things out in science. And sometimes people perhaps incorrectly misidentify themselves as skeptics. And what they're practicing instead is not open inquiry. What they're practicing is a kind of zealousness, an overzealousness.
Stubbornness at the very least.
Sure. And that way it becomes another fundamentalist ideology, and just as dangerous as any other fundamentalist ideology, I would argue. And that's just one entity's opinion. But what we can say now is that you probably shouldn't use a ton of things just to be safe. If you hear something in the wind, like this might cause this specific thing, and a lot of people went to court for it, then it's a personal choice. But
tread lightly. It's up to you. Absolutely. But that's why I did want to bring up the lead in Stanley Cups things, because I think it's so easy for someone to read that headline and immediately be like, oh, lead in Stanley Cup is going to kill us all. And not to say that maybe there won't be more research that comes out that says the levels are beyond allowable or they're not good, but you should think about more like, the big picture before you make those decisions. That's the opposite side of it.
You're right. I want to talk about how frustrating it is that things like Roundup are bad, because it seems like such a beautiful miracle substance for someone who's borderline OCD like me. When I look out at my grass and I go, look at all these stinking weeds everywhere. And now I can't spray them with anything. I got to go out and pick them one by one out from the root.
I believe Al Gore would call that an inconvenient truth.
And here we wrap it up. Want to hear from people who have worked in this industry. Would love to hear your take on these products. Like, are there safe herbicides? Are there safe pesticides? What do you think more of your fellow conspiracy realists need to know? Also, I want to give a quick shout out to Elmo. Thank you for the mental health check-in earlier. Yeah, a lot of angst in Western society.
So I headline.
Wait, what is that?
Just people were. I just want to say the headline because I love this term, trauma dumping on Elmo.
Right.
Because on the social media account for, I guess, Sesame Street, Elmo wanted to know how everyone was doing, and apparently not super well.
Yeah, And Elmo did respond just as we were going in to record today. You can find a great article about the whole debacle on the BBC. Shout out to the journalist Noor Nanji. You can also find it on X, FK, Twitter. One last shout out, guys. We have to say congratulations and good luck to Crystal Gable, who is non-consensually running for president in Minnesota. She got a Google alert that told her she's on the primary ballot for the presidency in Minnesota. And according to reporting, she cannot get off the ballot. She does not want to be POTUS.
What?
Minnesota
so it's like a joke?
Insists, we don't know. We know that she spoke with the Star Tribune and said, quote, "I did not give consent to be on the Minnesota ballot for this race."
Is this a public figure at all, or is this just like a clerical error because of a mistaken connection with a name?
It definitely is not. If conspiracy it is not a conspiracy that she was in on. So let us know the times you've accidentally run for office, folks.
What a great plot for sort of a comedy, sort of satire. Someone's name accidentally ends up on the ballot and they win because all the other candidates are that garbage.
The Eddie Murphy vehicle.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised if this had been done. You talking about Bowfinger? Or
no, it's earlier than that. He goes into Congress based on name recognition, and spoiler, he ends up doing the right thing. Because it's a wholesome comedy. We can't wait to hear your thoughts, folks. Thanks as always for joining us. We'll be back later this week with a lot of strange things and some stuff they don't want you to know. In the meantime, join up with us. We'd love to hear from you. We try to be easy to find online.
That's right. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook, YouTube, and X, FKA Twitter. You can also find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram and Tickety Talk.
Feeling down? Why not give us a call? 1-833-STDWYTK.
I'll stop now. That was Elmo asking to...
Thanks for checking in.
That was Elmo.
Thanks for checking in, man.
why don't you check in with us, too? We're a lot like Elmo. The number is 1-833-STDWYTK. It's a voicemail system. You got 3 minutes, and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. I think that's it. What if people want to send us an email?
Then all you have to do is reach out and touch space at our good old-fashioned email address, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We read every missive we get. Take us to the edge of the rabbit hole. We'll do the rest. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.